Um, Dr. Abdullah, we will start. We're joined by Ambassador Sohail Mahmood, as well as our chairman, Ambassador Khalid Mahmood.
Bismillah ar-Rahman rahim and good afternoon from Islamabad to everybody.
Good afternoon, Ambassador.
Uh, Silent. Should we start? Okay. All right. So, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the Center for Afghanistan, Middle East, and Africa at the Institute of Strategic Studies, in collaboration with the Middle East Monitor, I welcome you all to today's webinar titled The Future of Palestinian Refugees, marking World Refugee Day. The plight of refugees, as we all know, is a profound humanitarian crisis that transcends borders, cultures, and religions. Each refugee story is unique. It is marked by hardship and at the same time hope. It is a struggle as well as a hope for survival. Now, we honor the unwavering spirit of refugees and their right to safety, dignity, and of course, a better future. Pakistan, which has a long history of hosting Afghan refugees for more than 4 decades, knows this all too well. Despite facing its own domestic challenges, be it economic or social, Pakistan has hosted Afghan refugees and has tried to provide them with essential humanitarian support, including food, shelter, healthcare, and education. And therefore, as I reiterate, understands not only the plight of refugees, um, but as well as the impact of hosting them. Now, today, CAMIA at ISSI, again in collaboration with MEMO, is marking World Refugee Day by focusing on the Palestinian refugee crisis, making it one of the longest standing and most complex humanitarian issues globally. Now, since 1948, millions of Palestinians have been living in exile, yearning for a place they can truly call home. According to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, there are more than 6 million registered refugees, with nearly a third residing in camps across the Middle East, primarily Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, of course, Gaza itself, and the West Bank. Now, these camps are often characterized by overcrowding, and poverty, to say the least. Their situation is a poignant reminder of the enduring nature of displacement and the urgent need for a just and lasting solution, which we all have been yearning for. Despite these challenges, Palestinian refugees, I have to say, have shown remarkable resilience, maintaining their cultural identity and striving to improve their lives as well as the lives of their communities. Their stories of endurance and perseverance inspire all of us to continue advocating for their rights and, of course, well being. The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, has reported that forced displacement globally has reached unprecedented levels this year, primarily due to Israel's ongoing brutality. Since October 7th, Israel's ongoing barbarity on Gaza has led to the killing of more than, well, it says 37,396 people, but this figure obviously is going up by the second and by the minute, with more than 70% of them, according to UNICEF, being women and children, and over 85,000 injured. Moreover, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced from their homes as Gaza remains under a comprehensive blockade, depriving its population of basic yet fundamental rights and essential supplies. The ongoing reign of terror has been unleashed on Palestine, amounting to what can only be characterized as genocide, has further led to further displacement, putting into question the right of return of refugees. Now, the ongoing and unprecedented loss of innocent lives, again due to Israel's brutality, underscores the urgency of finding a peaceful and just solution. Until then, it is important to remember that when there is systematic oppression, equating to apartheid and genocide, there will be resistance. Hence, as we reflect on World Refugee Day, let us stand in solidarity with refugees worldwide, particularly with the Palestinian refugees whose plight demands our immediate attention and, of course, action. Let us amplify their voices, support their dreams, and work tirelessly to ensure they are not forgotten by advocating for their rightful return to an independent homeland with Jerusalem as its capital under the two-state solution. Now, to discuss all this and more, we have an extremely distinguished lineup of speakers that have joined us today to discuss this issue of immense importance. We are joined by Dr. Salman Abu Sita, who is the founder and president of Palestine Land Society. We are joined by Professor Noor Masalla, who is a Palestinian historian and former director of the Center for Religion and History at St. Mary's University, Twickenham. We are also joined by Dr. Nadir Ul-Turk, who is the Deputy Head of Mission of the State of Palestine in Pakistan. And of course, we are joined by Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, who's the Chairman, Board of Governors, ISSI, Ambassador Sohail Mahmood, who's the Director General, ISSI, and of course, our very dear Dr. Dawood Abdullah, who's the Director of the Middle East Monitor. So before we begin, I would like to hand over the floor to Ambassador Sohail Mahmood for his remarks. So you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Ms. Amna Khan. Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Chairman, Board of Governors, ISSI. Dr. Nadir Al-Turk, Deputy Head of Mission, Embassy of the State of Palestine in Islamabad. Dr. Dawood Abdullah, Director, Middle East Monitor, Memo. Distinguished speakers, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Allow me to begin by extending my warm greetings and also by thanking you all for joining us in this session being held in connection with the World Refugee Day. Our primary focus today is on the future of Palestinian refugees. We are privileged to collaborate with the Middle East Monitor, our long-standing partner in organizing this webinar. I express deep gratitude to Dr. Dawood Abdullah and his colleagues on this account. Our gratitude is also due to other eminent speakers, including Dr. Salman Abu Sita and Professor Noor Masalla, for taking time out and joining us today. We would all surely benefit from their vast knowledge and deep insights. I also thank our dear brother, Dr. Nadir Al-Turk from the Palestine Embassy, for being here to share his thoughts on this important subject. Distinguished participants, as noted, Pakistan has a long history of hosting Afghan refugees since the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, making it one of the largest refugee hosting countries globally. At its peak, the number of Afghan refugees in Pakistan was more than 5 million. We still have more than 3 million Afghans in all categories, from registered refugees to those undocumented. Despite facing economic constraints and social challenges, Pakistan has provided humanitarian support, including food, shelter, healthcare, and education to them. The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, has reported that forced displacement globally has reached unprecedented levels this year, driven by Israel's war on Gaza and conflicts in Sudan and Myanmar. Conflict remains a very, very big driver of mass displacement, UNHCR Chief Filippo Grandi told the media recently. According to UNHCR's annual report, 117.3 million people were displaced globally at the end of last year. UNRWA has estimated that between October and December 2023, up to 1.7 million Palestinians, more than 75% of the population in Gaza, were displaced by Israel's war on the territory, with many forced to flee multiple times. Historically, the Palestinian refugee crisis remains one of the longest standing and most complex humanitarian issues in the world. Its root causes lie in the illegal occupation of Palestinian lands by Israel, the cruel and dehumanizing treatment meted out to them by the occupying power, and the constant campaign to dispossess them and even target them in refugee camps, as we see in Gaza today, in blatant disregard of international law, international humanitarian law, and all norms of civilized behavior. For 7 decades, millions of Palestinians have been forced to live in exile, yearning for a place they could truly call home. Their situation is a poignant reminder of the enduring nature of displacement and the urgent need for a just and lasting solution. The ongoing Israeli military onslaught has exacerbated their plight, with frequent attacks and constant blockades, resulting in both massive killings as well as severe disruption of lives and livelihoods, particularly in Gaza. This persistent displacement and associated challenges remain central to the conflict, with the right of return for refugees being a pivotal issue in any peace negotiations. Distinguished participants, as we mark this year's World Refugee Day, we must reaffirm our solidarity with the Palestinian refugees, as well as other refugees worldwide, and call upon the international community to take urgent steps for the alleviation of their hardships. This should include addressing the root causes of displacement, ensuring that refugees have access to fundamental rights and opportunities, and fostering environments where they can rebuild their lives with hope and dignity. Let me conclude by recalling what Palestinian author and intellectual Edward Said wrote in his personal account in the essay titled Leaving Palestine. Edward Said writes that his father rarely spoke about their exodus from Palestine, but his stray comments suggested, and I quote, the catastrophic collapse of a society and a country's disappearance, unquote. Edward Said goes on to say that only once his father elucidated the general Palestinian condition, remarking, and I quote, they lost everything. And a moment later he added, we lost everything too, unquote. The world has a lot to do to make sure Palestinians do not lose further and that they are enabled to reclaim what is rightfully theirs. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Sohail Mahmood. Let us then begin the discussion. I would first like to hand over the floor to Dr. Salman Abu Sita, who has joined us. Please unmute yourself. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for the Institute of Strategic Studies to arrange this meeting about this very vital subject which occupied the world, the Arab world, the Muslim world for 75 years. But the hypocritical West, the colonial West, has been filling the cyberspace in the last 8 months about hostages, about their right to go home. I agree hostages must return home. But who are the hostages? The hostages are 2 million Palestinians in the prison camp called Gaza Strip. They were expelled in 1948 from 247 towns and villages in the southern part of Palestine. They lived in the southern 50% of Palestine. They have been pushed and crammed by 90 massacres into only 1% of Palestine. Since that time, they have been held hostages for 75 years. And the West never moved a finger to bring them back home, but they are determined to return home. These Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, they are crowded at a density of 8,000 persons per square kilometers. The settlers in their land are scattered at a density of only 7 persons per square kilometers. That means the Palestinians, who are the homeowners, are crammed at 1,000 times the density of the settlers. Yet they are accused of being the aggressor. Who is the aggressor? The aggressor is the people who came from Eastern Europe in smuggler ships to our land, took over our land, and made us refugees. Not only they were made refugees in 1948, not only they were attacked today to the loss of 120,000 killed and injured, the largest casualty of people anywhere in recent history. Not only that, but even since 1948, they were attacked in Gaza in 1953, 1956, in 1967, in 1871, in 1987, and constantly for the last 20 years from 2005. These are the hostages which deserve to return home. But that is what we call a Nakba. A Nakba, of course, as we all know, is the depopulation of 530,000 villages in Palestine. It is the conquest of 80% of Palestine by the foreign European settlers. It is also the place where the Palestinians have been made refugees by 100 or even more 100 massacres. And who did that to them? A foreign force organized and trained by the West, Britain, and then United States. They carried out so many operations. Let us give you some figures for those. The Zionist army attacking Palestine in 1948 was composed of 120,000 soldiers. They were arranged in 9 brigades, and they carried out 38 military operations. And they carried out over 90 massacres in order to depopulate and occupy the villages of 530,000 villages. Today, they are the refugees which we know who they are. There are 9 million refugees. Only 5 or 6 of them are recognized by the United Nations. The rest are refugees not recognized. We all know that the international law is on their side. Resolution 194, which was passed by the United Nations on 11 December 1948, is still affirmed almost every year by the United Nations. And this right to Palestinians is not only a legal right, it's for them a sacred right to return home. Of course, it's also a legal right. But in addition to that, they think of it and they work on it as a feasible right to be implemented. We, among other people, made a study whether the right of return, in addition to being legal and sacred, whether it is feasible or not. We did a lot of studies and found that 87% of all Israeli Jews live only in 12% of Israel. Only that. Actually, we can go further. We can say that 87% of all Israeli Jews live in 55 localities out of 924 localities listed. But this is miscalculation, because of the 55 localities, they are located in only 1,400 square kilometers of Israel, which means it's 6% of Israel. So then the question arises, who then occupy the land Israel occupied, which is 80% of Palestine? The answer is very clear. It's controlled by the army, or its words of aggression and attacks about Arab and Muslim countries. They control that. Plus, of course, part of this is given to the Jewish National Fund. So not only by our calculations, but also by Israeli figures, 88% is controlled by the army and similar organizations. So the return, therefore, is feasible if you want to apply the international law. We went further than that. We arranged for young architects, Palestinian architects, to devise plans to rebuild the destroyed Palestinian villages. Every year, we have about 50 or 60 young Palestinian architects from various universities competing to find the best design for the destroyed villages. These designs are judged by British jury in London every year. So far, we have 270 young Palestinian architects participating. They have completed the complete design of 50 or 60 destroyed Palestinian villages. So in summary, we have the right, we have the history, we have the geography, we have the plan to build future free Palestine. And I'm sure this will happen. Now, the young people around the world have risen in a voice of conscience to speak about the right of Palestinians to return. They have been denied that for 75 years because of the silencing of the voice of Palestinians. This is no more the case. I'm sure the future is for free Palestine because it is reenactment of a fact and a history and the right which has been our situation for 4,000 years in Palestine. Just one sentence to conclude. When we hear about the preferred solution is the two-state solution, this is a mockery of justice. Two-state solution, which nobody actually defines clearly, it simply means how much part of Palestine you chip off and give it to the settlers in Europe. How much of it? In 1936, they started by giving them 10%, then it is 80%. And then are we really chopping Palestine into pieces? The answer for the future is simple. Human rights principles and not political solutions. Human rights principles means everybody should be allowed to return to their home and live in peace and in democracy. If someone else, a foreigner, would like to live with them, they could do so under these democratic rules. But there shall not be ever Zionism because it's a criminal doctrine and criminal practice. So let us always hope for the return of Palestinians to their homes. This is the only feasible and the only possible answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siddha. I would now like to request Dr. Nadarul Turk for his remarks.
Assalamu alaikum. If you don't mind, with your in presence of my doctor, Professor Dr. Doma Salha, I can't speak for him. He is one of my precious doctor in Birzeit University since 35 years. So I will, with your permission, I will have a speech after him. Thank you very much. This is only part of my respect for one of my precious teachers. Thank you very much.
Of course, of course. With all due respect, the floor is yours, Professor Noor Masalla.
Thank you all, and assalamu alaikum. And a big thank you to Dr. Nader. I'm really delighted to see him. I haven't actually met him, but we have corresponded, at least actually through Facebook. So I'm really excited to see all of you and hear all of you. And I think Dr. Salman Abu Said actually has summed up some of the key issues about the Palestinian refugee issue and about the historical background of this issue. I don't think we can talk about the future in abstract or in without looking at the history and the historical causes of the Palestinian refugee issue and the fact that the Palestinian refugees did not leave voluntarily. Today we have refugees leaving out of civil war, out of hunger, out of all sorts of issues. The Palestinian refugees were driven out in 1948, and they were driven out during the Palestine Nakba systematically. The Israeli strategy in 1948 was maximum land and minimum Arabs. And I'm afraid the same Israeli strategy still today applied to the West Bank and Gaza. But this was vicious, deliberate, systematic, planned. I have written a number of books about this issue, and I think Dr. Salman has actually also highlighted this issue about the Nakba. The Nakba is so central to our Palestinian collective memory, our trauma, our connection with the past. And a lot of Palestinians are talking about continuing Nakba now with the Israeli onslaught on Gaza, with the Israeli genocidal war on Gaza, with the fact that more Palestinians are being pushed out of their places. And there's also an Israeli war on the West Bank, by the way, hardly mentioned in the Western media. The Israelis are trying to clear big parts of the West Bank, what they call Area C. But I do want to say a couple of things about the past. Historical truth does matter, and international law does matter, and the UN resolutions on the question of the refugees do matter. And I think we Palestinians need to stick to international law. And I believe international law is on our side. 194 is central to the way we need to deal with the Palestinian refugee issue and the right of the Palestinian refugees to return to their homeland. Now, we have to remember in the post-Nakba period in 1950, 1960, it was really the Palestinian refugees who kept the Palestinian identity alive. Israel tried to wipe out Palestine from the map completely. If you look at international maps in the 50s and even the 60s, there's no, Palestine is not there on these maps, but the refugees kept that identity going. The refugees revived the Palestinian national movement. The Palestinian refugees created the PLO. I want to give the refugees a credit actually for that. And I think these refugee camps in Gaza in the 50s and the 60s kept the Palestinian guerrilla movement also alive, and they kept that identity. So I think we need to think about how do we empower them. And I think the Palestinian refugee issue was also central to our struggle and the struggle of the PLO in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Something did happen in 1993 with the Oslo process. And I'm one of the people who tried to contribute to this process, despite the fact that I was a bit critical of it. In 2000 at Camp David, when Yasser Arafat met Ehud Barak, I was asked to contribute a paper on the Palestinian refugee issue. Despite my misgivings and criticism of the process, I did give the Palestinian team a paper insisting on the historical truth, the expulsion of the Palestinians, the fact that these people insist on their right of return because they did not leave voluntarily, and the whole question of their rights. And I really was hoping at the time that we need to center the Palestinian refugee issue. We need to make it center to our strategy as Palestinians. We should not trade the question of Palestinian state in the West Bank with giving up the centrality of the Palestinian refugees. I think the Palestinian team at the time, they did prioritize the question of Palestinian self-determination on the West Bank. They were hoping Israel would recognize the Palestinian state on the West Bank. The truth is, Israel never recognized the right of the Palestinian to a state on the West Bank. They never recognized the two-state solution. So the question of trade-off wasn't there even on the table. The Israelis even didn't want to hear about that. The Israelis tried to liquidate this issue. They wanted to liquidate UNRWA. They're still trying to liquidate UNRWA now by accusing UNRWA of being a terrorist organization in Gaza, despite the fact that we know UNRWA is essential to the well-being of the Palestinian refugees. So I do think there were mistakes made in 1993. Another thing about the contribution of 93, somehow we Palestinians inadvertently also marginalized the Palestinian refugee issue, i.e. we thought that we could subsume the rights of the refugees in the right of the Palestinians to have a Palestinian state on the West Bank, i.e. we thought their rights somehow could be resolved within the our override to self-determination and the creation of a Palestinian state on the West Bank. The truth is the Israelis wanted neither of these two things. So here is the question about the Palestinian refugees in the last 3 decades, and the fact that although the Palestine question is a big issue now internationally, and we have more and more support, the Palestinian refugees themselves have been slightly marginalized. We don't hear their voices, we don't hear about their leadership, we don't hear about their representatives, and I think we need to go back to this issue of trying to empower them, trying to help them, support them, organize themselves. In my opinion, the voice of the refugees, their rights, their contribution, their leadership, we know the refugees played a big part in the Palestinian intifadas. So I think we need to go back to this issue of allowing themselves to speak for themselves, to represent. If we don't organize them, if we don't help them to organize, if we don't allow them to resist, they will not get international solidarity. We know people who resist and organize get international solidarity. People who don't resist and organize get sympathy but don't recognize. So I do want to go back to this issue of having the Palestine refugee issue and the voice of the refugees as center stage, allowing the refugees to speak for themselves, to organize, to make their case, and to be central stage in our struggle. And I think the question of Palestinian self-determination and the question of the Palestinian right of return, these are not mutually exclusive. These are complementing each other, and we need to build our struggle on these both tracks. And thank you all for this. I don't want to give a long speech. I just wanted to highlight these issues because I thought Dr. Salman has summed up some of the important issues about this subject. And thank you all.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nader Turk.
Assalamu alaikum. First, Eid Mubarak for everyone. Thanks a lot for Center for Afghanistan, Middle East, and Africa for organizing this seminar. Thanks for His Excellency Ambassador Suhail Mahmoud and His Excellency Ambassador Khalid Mahmoud for their support to Palestine, for great honor for my sister, Amina, for organizing this seminar. I will share some issues actually because after Dr. Abu Sitta, my professor, Dr. Nur Masalha's speech, I like only to share small issues. First of all, in 1948, Palestinian refugees was 950,000. 1967, Palestinian refugees from West Bank and Gaza Strip, include East Jerusalem, was 350,000. During the war against Gaza, started on 7th of October 2023, we have 2 million Palestinian refugees inside Gaza, and some of them go out of Gaza. And we have 4,000 Palestinians refugees in West Bank since 7th of October until now. Israelis try, according to international law, and we need to remind usually about Resolution 273, which is giving the right for Israel as a state built on our homeland in 1948. In 1949, we get Resolution 273, which gives the opportunity to Israelis to become full membership of the United Nations under 2 conditions. obey and facilitate the getting on the ground the resolution 181, which speak about two states in Palestine in 1947, and the other resolution is 194, which speak about right of return of Palestinian refugees to their own homeland, own hometowns, villages, and lands. Israel ignore this resolution and all other resolutions by United Nations, which is our more than 800 resolution in favor of Palestine. Israel is targeting UNRWA, and that start actually since long years, but become more stronger during President Trump, when he became the president of United States of America, when he going out with many things. One of it was freezing the donation by United States of America to UNRWA budget, because he said that this donation is too much, because the number of Palestinian refugees, according to his knowledge, are 50,000 only, not 7 million as who are registered in the UNRWA. Why? Because he decided that who was become refugees in 1948 and still alive, that is the Palestinian refugees. But his sons, daughters, grandsons, and daughters, and the next generations are not refugees. And actually, he copy and paste. A famous case was in the High Court, Israel's High Court, because in 1948, Israel is displaced 530 villages in the historical land of Palestine. Two of it was two villages, it is for Christians villages, Ephes and Boram. And the people of that, some of them stay and live in the borders and Israel and holding Israel citizenship. With that, they don't have the right to retain their own homes and lands in that two villages. And they go requesting the High Court of Israel to facilitate for them the right of return. After long years, the decision of the High Court of Israel was only who was alive and born in that time have the right to return to his own home. But his sons and daughter who born after that don't have that right. And Mr. Trump, in the deal of the century, he copy and paste that decision, which is against the international law. During this war, more than 192 of UNRWA workers was killed. During this war, Israelis publish propaganda lies without any evidence that 12 of UNRWA workers was part of the Palestinian fighters who crossed the borders on 7th of October. According to that, the Americans and some other European countries decide to freeze their donation to the budgets of UNRWA without getting any evidence of that, of course. We can't speak about Palestinian refugees without speak about Israeli settlers. Because the Israelis built their own state on our stolen homeland in 1948 with one of many bars, actually, of many lies. One of it that Palestine is a land without people for a people without a land. So in their mind, they keep from day one that they need to displace Palestinians, people, and replace them with Israelis, Zionists, who came from everywhere in the world to settle in Palestine. So we remember we need to discuss this issue side by side. Resolution 194 and the latest resolution 2334, which speak about illegal Israeli settlements in the Palestinians' homeland. Question for the world: how long the Palestinian refugees need to wait until they have the opportunity to enjoy their right of return? Since 1948, we are waiting and we're still waiting, and this resolution is still pending and waiting for international society to have the power to facilitate and activate these resolutions and other resolutions in favor of Palestine. Other question for the international society: who gives the right? The Israelis said that one of their lies that they were in Palestine 2,000 years before, and after that there was kick out of Palestine by Romans, by Muslims, by whatever they have said, and they are becoming refugees. So how become that the international society support the right of return for the Israeli refugees, which is 2,000 years before, according to their lies, by giving them the right to establishing a state of the land of Palestine by 181 resolution, and until now they don't have the power to activate 194 resolution with giving right of return for the Palestinian refugees, which is pending and keep pending, and we hope this can be end. In the end, as one of the Palestinian refugees, I hope when I'm alive, have the opportunity to join the right of return and going back to my homeland, my grandfather home in Bir Saba, and have the opportunity to visit my professor, Dr. Noor Masalha in Daburia, okay, to join each other. He come to visit me in Bir Saba, and I come to visit him in Daburia. Thank you very much. May Allah bless you all. Eid Mubarak. Pakistan's in the bad, Palestinians in the bad.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nader, for your remarks. I would now like to request Dr. Dawood Abdullah for his remarks.
Thank you very much, Amina. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. On this occasion, it's very important to reaffirm the fact that international legal experts and human rights advocates share a common vision of the future for a just solution to the Palestinian refugee problem. And that their vision emanates from the premise of international refugee law and the guarantee of the universal human rights of the refugees. There are other bodies of law that, of course, guarantee the right of return, but no doubt international refugee law encompasses that principle. In practice, what does this mean? It means that for three components when we speak of return: that there is repatriation on the one hand to their homes, the restitution of their property which was stolen, and the compensation for decades of losses due to their suffering and inability to access their property. So these are the three components that are intrinsic or implicit in the concept of return. Over the last 100 years, wherever refugee issues were resolved or in any manner, it was always based on the principle of voluntary repatriation. The Palestinian refugee problem, however, has been the salient exception, not because of any intrinsic peculiarities to their case, but because of the unwillingness of the mediators to enforce the rules of international law. And this, regrettably, this has continued throughout the decades. Now, none of the so-called historical agreements that were made on the refugee problem actually attempted to resolve the refugee problem in a just manner, as we should say. A notable example is that of the Camp David Agreement of September 1978, which is celebrated as the most successful of the historic accords. That agreement, the Camp David Agreement, provided that Egypt, Israel, and Jordan, and the self-governing Palestinian Authority would resolve the problem of those refugees displaced in 1967, how to repatriate them. But with regard to the refugees from 1948, the accord left it up to Egypt and Israel to resolve their problem to resolve the problem by agreed procedures. See? Now, if you were to leave this matter up to Israel, if an agreement was dependent upon Israel's, support, it meant that Israel was effectively going to be given a veto on the matter. And it was for this reason the General Assembly in 1978 condemned, you see, the Camp David Accords. And it said that the Camp David Accords and other agreements have no validity insofar as they purport to determine the future of the Palestinian people and of their territories occupied since 1967. The General Assembly, 3 years later in 1981, further affirmed its rejection of the Accords, the Camp David Accords, insofar as it purports to resolving the Palestinian refugee issue. And it says that it strongly affirms its rejection of the provisions of the Accords which ignore, infringe, and violate or deny the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including the right of return. So the conclusion that we can draw from this is that according to the accepted standards of international law, relevant provisions that exist in the law can only be replaced by political agreements whose provisions grant rights that are equal to or more extensive than those already guaranteed by law. It cannot, deduct from or reduce or curtail the rights given or enshrined in international law. These political agreements must either affirm them or expand on the rights given under international law. Another, controversial agreement, before I end, I must point out here, is that of what was called in 1995, the framework for the conclusion of a final status agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. This agreement of October 1995 accepted in principle, it stated in principle that whereas the Palestinian side considers the right of the refugees to return to their homes is enshrined in international law and natural justice, it recognizes that the prerequisites of a new era, as well as the realities that have created them on the ground, have rendered the implementation of this right impracticable. So this agreement, what it is saying essentially is we recognize that in law and the right of return exists. But for practical purposes, we cannot do it because times have changed. This is in essence a dangerous concession, as it were, on the right of return. And so it was never implemented. it must be said, this document was never officially agreed upon, but it nevertheless is archived in the UN Charter, in the UN archives today. One can visit it and see that this was actually purported. And so one of the dangers of this proposal is that it creates the impression that there is a contradiction or conflict between individual Palestinian right of return, the individual's right, and the collective right of self-determination. Professor Noor rightly pointed this out, that there's no contradiction between the individual's right of return and the collective national right of self-determination. So to conclude, I wish to sort of return to the UN resolution 2535, which says that the problem of the refugees has arisen from the denial of their inalienable right under the Charter of the United Nations. Their return, therefore, is not a product of peace, but on the contrary, it is a necessary condition for the transition to peace. And so while politics do have a definite role to play in resolving the refugee problem, the centrality of international law is even more important. And I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dawood Abdullah, for those important points. I believe, Dr. Sita, you wanted to make an intervention?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. All our distinguished speakers have explained the situation about Palestinian refugees. Now it is time that we should look ahead. What shall we do in the future? This is our job, and therefore I congratulate the Institute of Strategic Studies to hold this meeting. It should lead to plan of action. We all agreed on the history and geography. Now, what should we do about it? I would suggest the following in reverse order. That means the first thing would be the least we could do, and then we follow to greater degree of urgency. First of all, the great world reaction about the genocide among young people, especially in the universities of the United States and Europe, is something we have to reap its fruits. Especially in the United States, the students are from the Ivy League, which means in 10 to 20 years or less, they will probably have very important decisions in the management of their country. We should take advantage of the situation and not think of it as a wave which will go away. We should make contacts or groups, people's groups, students' groups, associations between various countries, especially Arab and Muslim countries, with these students, and maintain the contact with them, provide them always with new data, with new information, create popular groups of all kinds. Now, the media is at the hands of everybody, not only the governments. Everybody can have a role in that. Second thing is, the countries which support Palestine, to start with the Muslim countries organization, should contribute more to the action done by South Africa. They should present their case, like Nicaragua, into the International Court of Justice as being partners in the claim against Israel. They should do that. Unfortunately, very few people did that. Is this organization, Organization of Muslim Countries, is not doing that? I don't see the point of having this organization. or it could be then therefore used for other purpose. Then, and the next one higher on the scale, the Arab League. Arab League has miserably failed to take serious action on that. And we know the reasons for that. This is not only regrettable, but really disgraceful. It should not be the case. Then we come to the home front. We Palestinians have even greater role to do, more than anybody else. First of all, as people, we are determined to recover our own rights. And we have not failed to do so for 27,000 days since 1948. But we must clean up our Palestinian house. We must clean it. We must elect a new leadership, elected by 14 million Palestinians. Half of these 14 million, 6 million or 7, are born after Oslo, and they never have a voice about their future. They should have that. We know why the Palestinian general elections are held back or stopped, because all the enemies of Palestine are preventing that from happening. And this includes Arab, Muslim, and foreign countries. This barrier should be broken. And I know, and many of you probably know, that there are many organizations, people's organizations, conferences, meetings. I have participated in many of them and organized some of them for the Palestinian people to stand up and say, we must elect a new leadership. It's our right. Article 4 of the Palestinian charter says every Palestinian is a member of PLO and he has the right for elections and to be elected. We should do that. And by the way, on this occasion, I would ask Pakistan to host our meeting. Many countries refused to allow us to assemble and call for public elections. If Pakistan, for example, which has a great record in that, would allow Palestinians to assemble and call for elections, this will be an important step to realize our national rights. The first of them is the right of return. So I hope this meeting will come up with action plan, what we should do from now on. Everyone has a duty, and we should do that duty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sitta. Oh, sure. I think Dr. Nadir would like to make a comment.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak again. Dr. Abu Sitta actually highlight important issue. As a Palestinians, what we needed is more democracy. But being under occupation not give us this opportunity. I think Dr. Abu Sitta and everyone of the honorable speakers remember that to 2021, our leadership decided to go for elections. But Israelis refused to give the right of our Palestinian people who are live in East Jerusalem to join that elections. And it is a bad message after the deal of the cemetery by our leadership if they agreed to have elections without our people in our own capital not joining that elections. That means that we are accept and obey the Americans' decision against the international law that Jerusalem and Al-Quds, it is the capital of Israel, not the capital of Palestine. According to that, our leadership decide to extend and delay the elections until there is opportunity to facilitate the participate of our people in East Jerusalem in that elections. Second, Dr. Abu Sitta mentioned important things about the American students who are protest in favor of Palestine. Actually, I like to highlight other side of that protest, that right now their future is in danger because there is many communities, Zionist communities, work in the United States of America, that anyone protest in favor of Palestine, anyone write an article in favor of Palestine, anyone share a good opinion in favor of Palestine, he going to be in the blacklist, which mean whatever, he is academic, doctor, engineer, artist, actor, whatever, he will be under siege by the Zionist. So one of that important and famous communities is Camera, which is community for accuracy in Middle East reporting and analysis. They are working hard by making lobbying, watching everything, and to try to keep everyone under their control to make them slaves in favor of Israel. So our duty as Muslim Ummah, first of all, to make and act in the same way, but in positive way, which means we need to protect our supporters by give them the better opportunities if there those opportunities by the Zionists in other countries. So we need to facilitate for them better future by supporting them. We need to facilitate for them work if they lose the opportunity of the work. So we need to be united in favor of them, that they are united in favor of us. Second, it is, and with this we said in Arabic, who speaks the language of his enemy, he is feeling safe. So it is not wrong if we are using their ways, but in our ways, which mean in positive way, not in negative ways. BLO. BLO, it is a visitive of all the Palestinians everywhere. And I think all the political groups need to be part of it. So I renew on behalf of my leadership the invitation for others, political groups who are still out of BLO to join BLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, because it is for all of us, not only for Fatah, not only for others, political groups, it is for all the Palestinians. So make it stronger, make our cause stronger. Being united is very important. And I think after this high price, which are you paying daily in Gaza and West Bank, the genocide and bleeding, our people are bleeding, our people are starving to death, we need to be united. Changing the leadership is democracy. We are going to elections when in the right time, when this tragedy ends, we will have the opportunity to organize elections and the people decide who's going to lead them. But until that, we need to be united under this leadership until we pass this tragedy to getting better future for our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sitta, I believe you wanted to make a...
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you again. Very briefly, in answer to Dr. Turk has kindly explained a lot of things about the subject. Let me add my part on this. I'm a member of the Palestine National Council since 1974, and we have not a single legal meeting in the last 30 years, although I get invited all the time. The reason is very simple. There is no legal meeting for the Palestinian National Council under the Israeli occupation. There has never been before a meeting under the Israeli occupation, except recently. The answer is very simple. Palestinian National Council can meet outside Palestine, where not under the Israeli occupation. That's number one. As a late speaker of the House said, لا صلاة تحت الحراب, no prayer under the guns of the enemy. That means no legal meeting of Palestinians should take place under the thumb and the bayonets of the Israeli enemy. That's very clear. And it has not been the case before Oslo ever. That's number one. Number two, they say that it's difficult to conduct public elections. This is not true. I spoke with Hannah Nasser, who is the organizer of the elections, and we provided him, and he is a very good man, with data about Palestinians anywhere in the world. And they could conduct elections anywhere in the world. Iraqis have done that. Many countries have done that at times of distress. Third, if proper elections cannot be made, the answer is also simple. We already have 15 or 20 organizations of the Palestinian people in Ash-Shatat and diaspora. I don't like to use the word. That means they can be organized, and they are, and they have been, under engineers, doctors, teachers, women, workers, students, business people. We had all these organizations, 15. What we can do is re-elect these 15 or 20 organizations of the Palestinian people in Ash-Shatat. And then they could be, from those, could be a nucleus for a newly elected Palestinian National Council, representing more than half of the people, as I said, who are not representing today. So the problem with not holding elections are false and not acceptable by the majority of Palestinians. And it is time that the handle for their future is sent back to the people themselves.
Thank you. Thank you for those remarks.
Can I say
Yes,
something?
please. Of course, please.
I think we are kind of in danger of missing the point here and the current moment, which is a huge opportunity for Palestine and the Palestinians. I know the Palestinians need to sort out their own house and their own leadership, and I'm hoping that they will do it in due course, because I think leadership is essential. But at the moment, we need to look at the international scene. We have seen a sea change in public opinion in our favor. People mention the American encampment movement, the Sin movement. In fact, it is a global movement. We have it in the UK, we have it in Australia, we have in France. We have, these movements are forcing the issue of divestment of BDSC, of sanctions against. This is for the first time in the history of our activism. And we are activists. We are not just actually politicians. We are not just diplomats. We are activists. As a Palestinian activist, I can see what's happening around me everywhere. Hundreds of thousands of millions of people came out to demonstrate with us. In Britain, we have demonstrations every 2-3 weeks, hundreds of thousands. We have never seen this support of public opinion sea change. We have hundreds of lawyers in Britain, including senior judges, actually signing petitions against Israeli genocide. We need to grasp this moment. It's a historic moment for us. We Palestinians are winning on a number of fronts now, and we need to realize that things are changing. Horrible, incredibly horrific situations in Gaza going on. But internationally, we are winning a lot of support for the first time in our history, and we need to mobilize this support. We need to build up this anti-apartheid movement. We need to encourage all these people. And in France, it has been a sea change, even in the way Spain is behaving, Ireland is behaving, Norway is behaving, in the way the UN is commemorating the Nakba. For the first time in our history, the UN last year did commemorate the Nakba. These are historic changes, and it do have an impact on the question of the Palestine refugees and the fact that the refugees themselves also to be part of this process of mobilizing, of having their voices heard internationally. So I think we Palestinians need to grasp this moment that there are many good things happening at the moment, and we have a lot of support. The Zionist, although they are powerful, although the Zionist lobbies are still very powerful in Britain, in the US, in the Biden administration, but in fact, there are a lot of cracks in this Zionist support, and they're not in control. Look at the International Court of Justice. Look at the World Court of Justice, the way they have shaken the international opinion. People are not always intimidated by the Zionists and Zionist lobby. I think we need to realize that the international legitimacy and international law and the courts of justice, well, they do matter, and we need to do a number of things and many things, and to work on many fronts, and to realize that civil society here in Britain and in the US, and also to some extent in the Arab world, perhaps to a lesser extent, and in Europe, it does matter. Things are changing. We do need to grasp these things and to build on it, and to build on a movement which is about the future of ending apartheid in Palestine, the rights of self-determination for us Palestinians, the right of return. All these things actually are being crystallized now, and we need to capitalize on this moment. We mustn't miss this moment. This is the point I want to highlight.
No, very important, and I think Dr. Sitta also reiterated this. Let me now hand over the floor to Ambassador Khalid Mahmood for his remarks.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. See, as we commemorate the World Refugee Day today, our attention naturally focuses on what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. But I think this is a global phenomenon. The refugees have pointed out that there are millions of refugees in Sudan, Myanmar, and even Pakistan, Iran, So all need attention. But the point is, with reference to the Palestinian refugees, is that this is one of the oldest situation which is crying for a solution. Somehow, as you know, that even this convention on refugees, it was adopted after the creation of this Palestinian refugee problem. It was in 1950. UNHCR was also established afterwards. And a special institution, UNRWA, was established for the Palestinian refugees. So sometimes, which to me looked very strange, I was reading somewhere, that UNHCR doesn't claim any responsibility for Palestinian refugees. They say it is for the UNRWA to look after. So while the main body is not doing its responsibility towards Palestinians, I think that lacuna has to be rectified. That it is a common responsibility, a global responsibility. And as regards UNRWA, as we know also that it is always short of funds. Of course, UNHCR also faces sometimes these problems. But here now in the recent developments, just on unsubstantiated case allegation that some UNRWA officials were involved in what they called the attack on the Israelis by Hamas, many countries withheld their contributions. And now I think gradually some countries have resumed their contribution. So it should not be a knee-jerk reaction that for what they allege Hamas has done, that the entire Palestinian refugees should be punished for that. You see, the previous speakers have already explained in great detail the various facets of this issue. The fundamental issue remains that we have to address the root cause. And root cause, as we know, lies in the non-resolution of the Palestinian question, for which there is a clear prescription by the United Nations. It was pointed out that it is a two-state solution. It is the return of the refugees. It is the restoration of the property, restitution of the property to the refugees, and compensation for the whatever losses they have suffered. So all these things are provide a real solution to the problem. But I will agree with the view that while we are pursuing this larger question of the realization of the right of self-determination of the people of Palestine, we should not let this issue of Palestinian refugees get marginalized, because this is the immediate problem staring in our face. While other issues, the fundamental, of course, the root cause has to be addressed, but it should not prevent or divert our attention from the more pressing issue of the refugees. Rightly, it has also been pointed out that refugees have played a great role in keeping the issue of Palestine alive. And so we cannot forsake them. But unfortunately, these refugees continue to suffer, not only who are in Palestine, occupied Palestine, but those who are even in other countries dispersed all over the world. So they need also to unite themselves. And now that the tide is turning in their favor by greater awareness of the righteousness of their cause, both on the political, legal, and civil society level, I think this is the time to press on this cause more fervently and more energetically. And rightly, I think more responsibility lies not only on the Palestinians themselves, but also those, particularly the Muslim countries. I think they have to walk their talk. So with these remarks, I would like to conclude and thank Dr. Dawood Abdullah of the MEMO for collaborating with ISSI for organizing this conference on a very important and pressing issue, which needs our constant attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thank you. You are a doctor for us, but Ambassador Khalid Mahmood. So ladies and gentlemen, this does bring us to the end of today's webinar. Let me just end by saying that I think it's important for all of us to realize that no one willingly chooses to be a refugee. And while on this Refugee Day, we do think about the millions and millions of displaced people, refugees throughout the world in particular, our hearts and prayers go out to the people of Palestine. Our hearts and prayers go out to the people of Palestine, in particular for the brutalities to end and for the right of return of the Palestinians to their homeland. I would just like to end with these brief remarks and once again thank our speakers for enlightening us, because it truly has been a very interesting discussion. In no particular order, let me express my gratitude once again to Dr. Salman Abu Seta, Professor Noor Masalla, Dr. Nadirul Turk, and of course, Dr. Dawood Abdullah for taking part in this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Have some cake.